Imagine waking up one day and realizing that every decision you've ever made, every friendship, every career move, every person you've loved or pushed away, was not fully yours. At least, not in the way you believed. Beneath the surface of your conscious choices, something else has been moving the strings. Something ancient. Something buried. Something you've spent your whole life trying to avoid looking at directly. You dress in the morning, you speak your words, you chase your goals, and yet, who really decided them? Was it the self you proudly display to the world? The one you post online, polish for conversations, rehearse for approval? Or was it the shadow you've hidden since childhood? The silent double who waits patiently in the dark corners of your mind? The unsettling truth is this: your shadow may know you better than you know yourself. It may whisper the insults you pretend don't wound you, stir the jealousies you deny feeling, ignite the rage you insist you've outgrown. It might even be the silent architect of your greatest ambitions, the desire for status, recognition, wealth, love, while you cling to the illusion that your will is pure and self-chosen. But here lies the paradox. If the shadow is you, then who are you? The person you parade before the world? Or the one you've locked away, ashamed and terrified that its emergence would expose your fragility? Which is more authentic? The curated image you defend? Or the disowned parts that secretly drive you? Consider this. The very traits you despise in others often mirror the impulses you suppress in yourself. That coworker whose arrogance infuriates you, could it be that you are equally afraid of your own hunger for power? That friend whose coldness chills you, might it reflect the same emotional distance you wield when closeness threatens your control? We recoil from the reflection because we do not want to admit that it belongs to us. So here is the great question, one most people never dare to face. Are you truly the author of your choices? Or are you a puppet pulled by the unseen gravity of your shadow? You pride yourself on rationality, on intention, on being the thinker of your thoughts. But think carefully. When you laugh too loudly at a joke, when you say yes while wanting to say no, when you choose comfort over risk, when you sabotage yourself at the brink of success, what hand guided that choice? Was it the conscious you or the hidden one? The terrifying possibility is this: the shadow is not merely an unconscious passenger. It is the secret navigator, the one who turns the wheel when you think you are steering, the one who writes your fears into the script of your life, ensuring you repeat patterns, chase familiar disappointments, and call it fate.
And if this is true, then what does freedom even mean? If the most forbidden parts of you, your anger, envy, lust, cowardice, cruelty, and even your buried brilliance, are making decisions while you look away, are you free at all? Or are you living in a self-made prison, locked by your refusal to face yourself? Imagine standing before a mirror, but the reflection does not show your face. It shows all the versions of you that you've denied. The child who once cried, but was told to be strong. The teenager who burned with desire, but was shamed into silence. The adult who still flinches at rejection, but hides it with bravado. Each of these selves lives inside you still, muffled and exiled. Yet they whisper, and when ignored long enough, they do not disappear. They take control. So again, whose life are you living? Yours or your shadow's? This is the paradox that has haunted philosophers and psychologists for centuries, the battle between the persona, the mask you show the world, and the shadow, the forbidden twin you pretend does not exist. You are both, yet you claim only one. You choose, yet something deeper chooses through you. And if that's the case, then perhaps the real question isn't whether you can escape your shadow, but whether you can endure the sight of it. Because what you repress does not vanish. It waits, patiently. For the moment when your defenses falter, when the mask slips, when the truth can no longer be contained. And in that moment, you will face the most dangerous truth of all. Your shadow has always been shaping every choice you make. And so we arrive at the threshold, the question that will not let you sleep easily tonight. What if the very life you're living is not yours at all, but the life your shadow demanded you live? The weight of this question presses heavily, but it is only the beginning. To understand how deeply this force has shaped you, we must descend into the hidden problem itself, the roots buried in the psyche where ancient fears, forgotten traumas, and unclaimed desires silently orchestrate your destiny. The first wound is almost always invisible. It happens early, before you even have the language to defend yourself. Perhaps it was the moment you reached out for affection and were met with coldness, the instant your tears were mocked instead of soothed, or the day you felt the burning sting of shame because you wanted something you were told you shouldn't. And so, like every human being, you began the great separation. You divided yourself. On one side, the self that was rewarded, praised, accepted. On the other, the self that was punished, rejected, humiliated. Slowly, without realizing it, you learned to amputate parts of
your own being. Your innocence, your spontaneity, your rage, your longing, all were exiled into a psychic underground we now call the shadow. Carl Jung wrote that the shadow is that which we do not wish to be, but it is more than the dark traits we deny. It is also the unlived life, the potentials buried because they threatened the fragile acceptance we craved. If you were told as a child that anger was dangerous, you disowned your fire. If vulnerability was mocked, you banished your tenderness. If ambition was condemned as arrogance, you smothered your hunger. This is the tragedy. To survive love, you betrayed yourself. Nietzsche saw this betrayal not as weakness, but as inevitability. He spoke of herd morality, the pressure of society to conform, to fit neatly into categories of good and bad, desirable and forbidden. From birth, you are taught what earns approval. You inherit an invisible script, and you obey it, even as you quietly suffocate under its weight. Schopenhauer, far more cynical, would insist that beneath these masks lies not freedom, but blind will. Our conscious life is but a theater where instinct and desire pull us toward survival, reproduction, and power. The shadow, then, is simply the will disowned, the drives we pretend are civilized away, even as they gnaw at us from beneath. But notice, these philosophers do not describe some distant abstraction. They are describing you. Think of the moments you've bitten your tongue, not because silence was wisdom, but because fear of rejection gripped your throat. Think of the opportunities you let slip, not out of contentment, but because some buried voice whispered, "You don't deserve this." Think of the times you've lashed out at someone you loved, bewildered by the violence of your own reaction, as if some other self had hijacked your body. These are not accidents. These are the fingerprints of the shadow. Modern psychology confirms what the ancients intuited. The unconscious is not passive. It is active, restless, shaping the trajectory of your choices in ways you cannot fully trace. Freud saw this in slips of the tongue, in dreams that betray forbidden wishes. Jung saw it in archetypes, the recurring figures of light and darkness that haunt human imagination. Today, neuroscientists find it in the way your brain predicts and reacts milliseconds before you're aware. The way trauma rewires neural pathways so that avoidance feels like instinct rather than decision. But why does the shadow remain hidden if it is so central? Because to face it feels like death. As children, survival depends on belonging. To be cast out is to perish. So when parts of you threaten belonging, you do not confront them,
You bury them. Shame becomes the lock, fear the chain. You convince yourself those parts don't exist. You construct a persona, a carefully crafted mask, and cling to it as yourself.
And yet, the more tightly you hold to this mask, the more power the shadow gains. Every denial feeds it. Every repression strengthens it. You can pretend you've tamed it, but your relationships reveal it. In jealousy, in overreactions, in the subtle way you choose partners who echo the wounds you never healed. Your career reveals it, in procrastination, in the strange comfort of failure, in the way success feels like a threat rather than a triumph. Your own body reveals it, in anxiety's grip, in compulsions, in illnesses born of unexpressed conflict. Here lies the hidden problem. You believe you are only what you consciously claim to be. You believe that by denying your darker impulses, you free yourself of them. But denial is not liberation, it is possession. The shadow does not vanish, it waits. And here is the cruelest irony. The very qualities you reject often contain the seeds of your wholeness. The anger you bury might be the courage you lack. The envy you deny might point to the unlived life you secretly crave. The fear you suppress might protect you from recklessness, if only you'd listen instead of silencing it. By splitting yourself, you are not protecting your humanity, you are fracturing it. Viktor Frankl, surviving the unspeakable horrors of the concentration camps, wrote that man's deepest freedom is to find meaning even in suffering. Yet how can one find meaning if half of the self is locked away in exile? How can one endure life's storms if one's own inner army is divided, half fighting, half suppressed? To see this is painful, almost unbearable, because it means admitting that the enemy you've been running from is not external. It is not your parents, not your boss, not society, not fate. It is you. More precisely, it is the half of you you refuse to acknowledge. So, the hidden problem is not that you have a shadow. Everyone does. The problem is that you live as if you don't. You speak of choice, of identity, of morality, while half your being pulls the strings from the dark. This is why Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And isn't that what you've already seen? The patterns that repeat no matter how hard you try to change, the heartbreaks that feel eerily familiar, the self-sabotage that strikes just when you're closest to success. You call it bad luck, bad timing, or destiny, but perhaps it is neither. Perhaps it is your shadow, demanding recognition through the only language it knows, repetition. Now ask yourself, if the shadow is the author of your unspoken fears and desires, and if ignoring it only enslaves you further, what are the consequences of letting it remain unseen? The answer, as we shall soon uncover, is far darker than you imagine.
These are the unseen consequences of ignoring the shadow. You mistake your compulsions for choices, your wounds for destiny. It seeps into every level of your life. The greatest tragedies in life are not the wars we read about in history books, nor the disasters that shake cities to rubble. The greatest tragedies are invisible. They unfold quietly, inside people who never realize that they are living lives written by their shadows. Think of the person who always chooses the wrong partner. Not once, not twice, but again and again, as if some hidden script keeps dragging them back into the same heartbreak. On the surface, they might insist they are searching for love, for kindness, for stability. But beneath the surface, the shadow pulls them toward what is familiar, not what is healthy. The child who once learned that love is conditional now unconsciously seeks partners who echo that wound. What looks like choice is actually compulsion.
Or consider the high achiever, the one who rises quickly, admired by colleagues, envied by peers. Behind the applause, however, lurks a hollow core. The shadow whispers that worth must always be proven, never simply felt. Success becomes a performance, an endless climb where the summit recedes with every step. The world sees confidence, but inside there is only a gnawing terror. If I stop, I will disappear. On the personal level, your shadow sabotages intimacy. The traits you bury in yourself are precisely what you cannot tolerate in others. If you exile your vulnerability, you will despise the neediness of a partner. If you repress your aggression, you will shrink before anyone assertive, calling them cruel. If you deny your capacity for selfishness, you will feel endlessly victimized by those who take what they want. And so, relationships become battlegrounds where your shadow fights itself in disguise. It sabotages creativity. The ideas you dismiss as foolish, the projects you abandon out of fear of ridicule, these often spring from the shadow, begging for expression. But instead of listening, you censor yourself before the world can. Your art remains unborn, not because you lacked talent, but because you lacked permission from yourself. It sabotages self-worth. Every time you suppress an emotion, you confirm the lie that you are unacceptable as you are. Shame compounds shame. Fear reinforces fear. You smile outwardly, but inwardly, you are a courtroom where the jury never stops delivering guilty verdicts.
The consequences are even more insidious. Whole cultures build elaborate masks while their collective shadows fester beneath. Take envy. Individuals deny it, pretending generosity while secretly resenting others' success. Societies that repress envy channel it into consumerism, convincing you to buy what others have not because you need it, but because your shadow cannot tolerate feeling less. Or aggression. Individuals suppress their rage, telling themselves they are peaceful, civilized. Yet the shadow leaks out in road rage, in online hate, in scapegoating entire groups. Nations too repress their shadow until it erupts as war, violence justified as virtue. Nietzsche saw this when he wrote that in individuals insanity is rare, but in groups, parties, nations, and epochs it is the rule. What he meant was simple. Collective shadows are even more dangerous than personal ones. When denied on a mass scale, they erupt with devastating force. And yet the most chilling consequence is not global, it is intimate. The slow erosion of freedom. Every day you live in denial of your shadow, you narrow the range of who you can be. Instead of choice, you live by avoidance. Instead of freedom, you live by compulsion. Psychologists describe this as projection. You cast onto others the qualities you cannot face in yourself. You call others greedy to avoid your own hunger. Label others cowardly to avoid your own fear. Despise others' arrogance to avoid your own ambition. And while you waste your energy fighting shadows on the walls, your real shadow tightens its grip on you. Your career, your relationships, your health all become distorted. You wonder why you repeat mistakes, why the same patterns return, why you feel trapped in cycles you cannot escape. You do not see that the trap is inside you. This is why Jung's warning is so haunting. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Think of the phrase, "you will call it fate." How many lives are wasted because people mistake their shadows for destiny? The man who convinces himself he was meant to live small because failure stalked him whenever he tried. The woman who believed she was meant to be unloved because every partner abandoned her. They see fate. In reality, it is repetition. The shadow demanding to be seen. The cost of denial. But perhaps the most devastating consequence of all is not failure, not heartbreak, not even despair. It is the quiet death of authenticity. Every time you reject a part of yourself, you grow further from who you are. By the time you reach adulthood, you may be little more than a collection of adaptations, masks layered over masks. You become a stranger to yourself. And what is more tragic than living an entire life without ever meeting the person you truly are? The poet Rilke once wrote, "The only journey is the one within." But how many never take that journey? How many stand at the threshold, too terrified to open the door where their shadow waits? They build comfortable routines, respectable identities, polished personas. And yet, late at night, when silence grows heavy, they feel it, the pull of the exiled self, demanding recognition. This is the unseen consequence, not simply that you suffer, but that you never live. Because the truth is brutal. The shadow shapes every choice you make, whether you acknowledge it or not. The question is not whether you have a shadow, but whether you are willing to face it before it consumes you. And here the urgency sharpens. For if the shadow remains unseen, it does not merely limit you, it devours you. Slowly, invisibly, it corrodes your freedom, your authenticity, your capacity for love and meaning. And you may not realize it until it is too late, until the life you lived feels foreign, hollow, and irretrievable. But what if there is another way? What if instead of running from the shadow, you could turn toward it? What if the very qualities you feared could become the keys to your freedom? The rebellion begins here, not by denial, but by confrontation, not by burying, but by embracing. The question is, are you willing to rebel against yourself? The rebellion, how to break free. Rebellion is not always loud. Sometimes it begins in silence, in the stillness of finally daring to look at what you've spent your entire life avoiding. To break free from the tyranny of the shadow, you must commit the most radical act imaginable. You must stop running from yourself. This is not easy. It will feel like betrayal. For decades, you've been loyal to the mask, to the persona that won you love, approval, and belonging. To turn inward now, to confront the exiled parts of yourself, will feel like treason against everything you thought kept you safe. And in a way it is. But rebellion against the false self is the only path to freedom.
Step 1. The act of seeing. The first rebellion is simply to see, to look into the mirror without flinching. Jung called this process shadow work. It begins with noticing the qualities in others that trigger you. Your disproportionate anger, your irrational dislike, your sudden envy. These are not about them. They are about you. The shadow hides in projection. When you see cruelty and cannot bear it, ask yourself, where does my own cruelty live? When you see arrogance and despise it, ask, where have I denied my own hunger for recognition? To see the shadow is to take responsibility. No more blaming, no more pretending. You accept that what you fight outside often mirrors what you avoid inside. This act of seeing is small but seismic. For once you recognize the shadow's hand in your life, its silent dominion begins to crack. Step 2. The descent. Seeing alone is not enough. You must descend. This descent is terrifying because it means revisiting the wounds you locked away. The childhood rejection, the moments of shame, the secret longings you buried. All of them must be unearthed. You do not descend to destroy them, but to reclaim them. Nietzsche urged us to become who you are. But how can you become who you are if half of you is chained in a cellar? The descent is the key to those chains. It may happen in therapy, in journaling, in meditation, or in the crucible of solitude. You will meet the parts of yourself you thought you had killed. The angry child, the needy adolescent, the jealous lover, the frightened adult. They are not gone. They are waiting. and they do not need punishment. They need integration. Step 3. The integration. Integration is not indulgence. To integrate your shadow does not mean acting out every forbidden impulse, nor does it mean abandoning morality. It means giving the exiled parts of yourself a voice in the council of your being. Your anger may no longer explode in destructive ways if you honor its message, that boundaries were crossed, that dignity was denied. Your envy may transform into guidance if you see it as pointing to unlived potential. Your fear, once acknowledged, may sharpen into wisdom instead of paralyzing dread. Integration is dialogue. You ask, what are you trying to tell me? What do you need? How can I use your energy in a way that serves life, not destroys it? On the society,
This is not the shallow freedom of doing whatever you please. It is the deeper freedom of becoming fully who you are. And that is the most radical act of all. Toward the final truth. Yet even this rebellion is not the end. For once you integrate your shadow, a greater revelation awaits. One that changes not just how you live, but how you understand existence itself. Because the shadow is not only personal, it is archetypal, universal. To confront your own darkness is to glimpse the darkness of humanity, and beyond that, the paradox of life itself, that light and dark are not enemies, but twins. That what you feared most was never meant to destroy you, it was meant to complete you. And so, beyond rebellion lies a final truth. A truth that does not just free you from your shadow, but frees you from the illusion of separation itself. The ultimate truth. The final, most powerful realization. Imagine standing at the edge of yourself. You've walked through the corridors of denial, faced the locked doors, confronted the exiled figures of your own psyche. You've wrestled with the rage you buried, the grief you silenced, the longings you disowned. You have rebelled. You have integrated. And now you arrive at the final threshold, the place where shadow and self dissolve into something larger. Here lies the most unsettling realization. There is no you apart from your shadow. For so long you believed the shadow was an intruder, a parasite lodged in the depths of your mind, something to be purged. But the truth is more radical, more terrifying, and ultimately more liberating. The shadow is you, not a foreign enemy, but your forgotten twin. Not an obstacle, but a dimension of your being. Carl Jung wrote that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The final liberation, then, is not about conquering the shadow, nor even about integrating it as though it were a guest in your house. The final liberation is realizing that there was never a division at all, only the illusion of one.
Light without shadow is blindness. A life lived only in virtue, in perfection, in curated goodness, is not a life at all. It is a mask so fragile it will shatter the moment reality intrudes. Likewise, shadow without light is despair. To live only in indulgence of rage, envy, lust, and greed is to drown in chaos. But together, light and shadow form the paradox of wholeness. You are not one or the other. You are both. You always were. Think of the yin-yang symbol, the swirl of black containing a drop of white, the swirl of white containing a drop of black. It is not balance as compromise, it is balance as inseparability. Light defines shadow. Shadow gives depth to light. Without one, the other is meaningless. The final realization is that your shadow is not something to fix. It is the proof of your humanity. It is the soil from which your compassion grows, because only those who have faced their own darkness
can truly understand another's. The death of the false self. This realization demands a death. The death of the illusion that you are only the mask, only the persona. The false self, with its endless performance, cannot survive this truth. And that death will feel terrifying because it feels like the death of you. But what dies is only the lie. What remains is the self in its totality, flawed, contradictory, radiant, and real. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre spoke of the burden of freedom, the terrifying responsibility of owning your choices without excuse. To see your shadow is to bear that burden fully. You can no longer hide behind fate, behind "that's just the way I am," behind the safety of denial. You are everything, the light, the dark, the wounds, the strengths. Nothing is outside of you. And with that, an astonishing freedom opens, because when nothing is denied, nothing can control you. The gift of the shadow. The irony of the shadow is that what once enslaved you becomes your greatest teacher. Your anger, once feared, now grants you courage to defend what matters. Your envy, once corrosive, now directs you toward unlived potential. Your grief, once suffocating, now connects you to the depth of human love. Even your cruelty, when faced honestly, humbles you into gentleness. Even your cowardice, when acknowledged, teaches you where bravery is most needed. The shadow, once embraced, ceases to haunt. It becomes guide. It becomes fuel.
But the final truth extends beyond the personal. Once you see your own shadow, you cannot help but see the shadow of humanity itself. The wars, the injustices, the hatreds of the world are not accidents. They are projections of the collective shadow. Nations, like individuals, exile what they cannot face. Entire cultures deny their greed, their violence, their fear, and then unleash them under the banners of righteousness. To awaken to your shadow, then, is to awaken to the world's. You begin to see through illusions of innocence, through the comforting myths of good versus evil. You recognize that humanity's problems are not born from monsters among us. They are born from the shadows within all of us. And this realization, though heavy, also holds hope. Because if shadow is universal, so is the possibility of integration. The work you do within yourself ripples outward, however subtly. Every individual who confronts their shadow becomes less likely to project it onto others, less likely to perpetuate cycles of violence, shame, and denial. Living the truth. So how do you live after such a realization? You live raw. You live whole. You stop pretending to be spotless, and in doing so, you allow others to stop pretending too. You speak honestly, even when your voice trembles. You forgive not by excusing, but by recognizing that what you condemn in others also sleeps within you. You create without censoring the strange, the dark, the unpolished. You love not because others are perfect, but because their imperfections mirror your own. You stop living as a performance. You start living as a paradox. The final liberation. And here, finally, is the ultimate truth. Your shadow does not shape every choice you make. It is every choice you make. Because the shadow is not a separate force. It is the undercurrent of your being, the half of the circle you once refused to see. Every desire, every fear, every hesitation and triumph, they all flow from the same source. The illusion of division,
was the prison. The recognition of unity is the key. The most powerful realization, then, is disarmingly simple. You are whole already. Not perfect, not pure, not free from contradiction, but whole. The shadow does not disappear, nor should it. It walks with you, not behind you. It is not your jailer, it is your witness. When you embrace this, the question that haunted you at the beginning dissolves. Are you truly the author of your choices, or are you a puppet of your shadow? The answer is neither, and both. You are not author or puppet. You are the story itself, unfolding in light and darkness alike. And so the journey ends not with conquest, but with surrender, the surrender to your own totality. The closing vision. Picture yourself walking down a narrow street at dusk. Shadows stretch long across the pavement, merging with the fading light. Once you might have quickened your pace, afraid of the darkness closing in. But now you walk slower. You notice how the shadows shape the light, how without them the sunset would lose its depth. You realize this has always been you, light and shadow, inseparable, necessary. And for the first time, you feel no urge to flee. For the first time, you are home.